welcome to Absolutely Not. My name is Katrina Stroll and my pronouns are they, she, he. Thank y'all so much for being here today. Real quick, if y'all appreciate the work that I do here and elsewhere, please visit the Support the Mission page of my website. There are several options to choose from to support my work, so please just choose one. The keywords for this episode are loyal, manipulative, and gaslighting. I encourage y'all to look up the definitions of these words and compare them to the definitions you carry with you. If you need help comparing, please let me know. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp allows you to connect with one of 24,000 licensed therapists in a safe and private online environment. You pay just a low flat fee for unlimited therapy with your therapist. Visit www.betterhelp.com/absolutelynot for more information and to get 10% off your first month. This link can be found in the show notes. Today's episode is titled, You Can Choose. Did I know that already? I mean, we'll find out. And I'm excited to talk about this topic with our amazing special guest, Diem Mooney, PhD, they, he. Dr. Diem is an IO psychologist with specializations in human factors research, solution architecture, and talent management. They are an advocate for positive user, customer, and candidate employee experience. Yes. He has worked in e-commerce, government, finance, healthcare, IT, and in tech startups. They identify as Afro-Latino, non-binary, autistic, and a veteran. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Of course.
I'm really excited to talk with you about people being allowed to choose the relationship that they are in at work. Have you met a lot of people that are aware of that they're allowed to choose?
Surprisingly, it's fewer than you would think. It's not usually positioned as a choice that you really have.
It's not a position or a choice that you really have. And when did you become aware of that? That's not a choice that you're really given often.
Well, I would say somewhat, of course, while in the military, you're in the military, you're conditioned to believe that you have to be here at this time, do this, this time, and so on and so forth. It's the culture around being in the military in general. Even my exit from the military, and communicating that I wanted to leave, it did not seem very voluntary. Like, no, it has to be in this date and this time and this way, and, all of that. So I would say realizing that I did have more of a choice was leaving the military and succeeding. So realizing that just because your employer says it has to be this way, or you can't do this, without, guidance and all that, is not necessarily true, because, you have, the ability within you to figure out who you are, what you need, what you desire, what your goals are, and make choices that align with that.
And make choices that align with that. I hope somebody heard that in the audience, because that's something I was unaware of, especially in my time in the military. They make sure the words that you use describing that time was conditioned and culture. Those words were never really broken down for me throughout my military time, or even in my exiting or my career. When were they kind of broken down for you?
I feel like I learned more about the ins and outs of the dynamic of organizational structure and candidate experience, book experience. I was introduced to it actually academically, because I originally was going to school for engineering, computer engineering. You're taught very early on, those are the fields you should get into, computers and engineering and, all of that. But I've always, because I'm autistic, I've always been introduced to the idea of psychology. I've had behavioral analysts for as long as I can remember. And I've always had an interest in understanding people because I couldn't do it naturally. So during time, I decided, I was like, you know what, I'm going to switch from engineering to psychology, because there's a disconnect and I really want to learn more about it. And it was actually from me, reading all these, these articles and these studies, and realizing the parallel between a lot of times what I saw in organizations and what psychologists see, from a mental health standpoint. Then I'm like, there's definitely, there's a lot of psychological aspects to workplace relationships. There's a lot of nuances in the interactions that we have. And psychologists from a clinical standpoint or social standpoint, they talk about it all the time, but not necessarily in the organizational standpoint. So that's actually why I became an IO psychologist, where I could focus more on employee experience and candidate experience and those nuanced relationships that we have in organizations.
Ooh, I know that every single leader in every single organization needs to hear just that snippet that you talked about, because I've come in contact with so many leaders who are just unaware of the psychology that is
Yes,
just the idea of psychology around managing and leading personnel, or just being in contact with human beings in
exactly.
general.
Yes, yes. They don't even
The
consider how often the interactions are happening. You know, we think about our personal life, the relationships, and how we manage them, and we go to therapy for personal reasons, right? And like, oh, we want to be a good relationship, we want to be good parents. But you're in a workplace setting for 40 hours a week. That's a large chunk of your time. Not to consider that you also need to understand the psychological impact that these relationships are having on you and what you're having on it. So it is definitely a two-way street, and something that you should be trying to develop just as well as you develop your personal skills.
I love that you keep using the word relationship in every facet. Work
Yes.
relationships, personal relationship. You hear that?
Mm-hmm.
That's just an adjective in front of the noun. That's still something that you're taking with you. It's a relationship
Exactly.
nonetheless. When
Mm-hmm.
did you have to, or when was the last time you had to remind someone that, hey, these are still relationships with people that need to be fine-tuned and examined on a daily, monthly, quarterly basis?
I would say that's pretty much every day for me. It's in my role. I would say that's literally my job. Right now my whole focus is that I have served as from executive coaching, where I focus more on the leadership aspect, and the psychology of engaging with customers or engaging with investors, and engaging with your employees, subordinates, mentees. There's so many people that you engage with, especially as an entrepreneur, that it is really critical that you are consciously aware of them. A lot of people kind of fall into these business relationships, professional relationships, where they be need, like I just need the money, or I just need a job, right? But you are committing to a relationship, and you wouldn't necessarily do that in your personal life, so you shouldn't do it there. So I would say as a coach, is something I discuss quite often, on one-on-one with entrepreneurs. As a professional in the human experience, I call it human experience, but the UX field, I'm constantly advocating for the end user. Where I'm talking with them saying, look, it's important that, you can't just build a product and say they're going to use it because I said so. That's not the way it works, because you're building a relationship with that end user. You are, by building that technology, by marketing it in a certain way, you're opening a line of communication with them that is very psychological and very intimate to some degree. Especially with loyalty, if you're wanting them to continue to come back and engage with you, build that trust in you, it requires an understanding of how to build meaningful relationships. So I would say from that aspect is something I do again. And then probably third would be academically. I decided to become a professor. I had a very rocky academic life, where I was in special education programs and I wasn't seen as less than. So to be in a position where I can actually teach people of color and those who have disabilities, and at a graduate level, it's really exciting. But I actually teach a class on intersectionality in design and solutioning, in which I'm always telling them, like, it sounds good, you want to go to grad school and you want to have these fancy titles and work in technology, but in actuality, it's the advocacy, it's the understanding the relationship that you are building, is understanding the relationship that you have in these rooms, in these leadership positions, where you have the power to truly say, you know what, this is a marginalized individual, and this is how I'm going to help to advocate for them. But in order for you to be a strong advocate, you have to be a relationship builder. You have to have that close ties, know how to communicate with individuals who may not necessarily care about, the marginalized population. It's not sales. It's truly figuring out, like, how do I build meaningful connections and relationships with these individuals? So I'm not a salesperson. I've never been one. I feel truly bringing value to others and building social awareness. Oftentimes is more than enough to really captivate others and be able to, again, connect.
I love all the work that you are doing. I love that you use very specific words that are making people see these relationships, even these work relationships, through
Yeah.
different lenses. The words that you
Yeah.
use are committing. You are committing to this relationship. These
Mm-hmm.
are intimate conversations and engagements that you are having, and they have
Absolutely.
to be close. All of these
Absolutely.
words are building me a picture in my brain of, wow, would I marry this person? Would I marry this job? Probably not.
Exactly.
If it's for a
Exactly.
paycheck, then let it be that. But if it's not, then you really need to reevaluate it and see it
Mm-hmm.
through different lenses. What I love that you talked about is you have to start building relationships. One of the
Yes.
things I constantly ask my guests, or I'm always asking my guests, is what their identities are. How is you know your identities? They were listed out.
Yes.
How has knowing your identities and knowing who you are as a full person helped you to create more intimate relationships?
Oh, actually, it's everything. So this is something that I feel like is my number one. Like, if anything that I ever say to anybody, I hope they get from it, is actually this piece right here, which is self-awareness. I talk about it all the time. It is the idea of simply knowing who you are. Every goal, every success story starts with that. It is truly reflecting on you. So I have this thing where I was kind of breaking it into 5 components. So it's kind of easy for me to remember, but it's like knowing, like, what do you want to do? Like, this is not a job necessarily, but a lot of times it does reflect on job. Like, if you woke up in the day, like, what would you want to do? Not your partner, not your boss telling you what to do, not even your kids. If you just got up and you just had a great day, what would you be doing with your time? Is it volunteering? Is it working a certain job? Is it holding a certain job title? Going to school? Like, truly figure out for yourself, what is it that would make you happy? And then, like, who's in your life? So this is, again, going back to the relationships that you have, but you would have to map out what's a good relationship, because you don't fall into good relationships with people. You have to know what good is, and then be able to assess objectively, this is what I think good relationship is. It's when I have these boundaries being met. It's when, this communication is being used, right? So you need to find that in advance for yourself. So who's in my life and what does that relationship look like? So again, whether it be your boss, you can say, if you're a job seeker saying, you know what, I want to look for jobs. Who's in your life? So how often is your boss connecting with you? Weekends? Is that a boundary for you? How does it look? Is it email? Right? You define it out. And then who do you make an impact on? So this goes more into your passion. Like, so are you doing something that you truly enjoy professionally? So who is it you make impact on? So who's like the end user of the value that you're bringing, right? For me, it's always been job seekers. I've always had a passion for helping, find employment and an employee experience, making sure that, individuals within their companies do not feel like they're the slave to the organization, rather that they are, this is a tool, that the job is a tool for them. I actually see jobs as simply tools. They help me, to achieve a goal. That's nothing more, nothing less. But so who do you make an impact on? And then, like, what's your financial situation? And this does not mean that you're gonna be a millionaire, right? Everyone's a millionaire or rich, but like, no, more specifically, like, do you just want to live comfortably? And, like, do you just not want to live paycheck to paycheck, but be realistic about who that is for yourself, and what you're reaching, striving for, what will make you happy? And then lastly is just that, where do you want to live? Because, you want that, again, is it in the city? Is it, suburbs? Is it in the country, in isolation? Kind of define that, because it kind of dictates everything else too, like who's in your life, basically where you are and things like that. So I kind of just break up, because self-awareness is so important that, looking at it in those kind of 5-year kind of metrics helps you kind of just walk through and say, okay, these are things that are important to me, and this is kind of how to walk through it. But yeah, so sorry, I just want to throw that in there. There's a way in which I kind of recommend as far as walking through building your self-awareness, because basically by knowing yourself, by knowing all these aspects of it, it's really hard for someone to come tell you something different, right? If I know what I want to do, I know where I want to live, I know who I am, then I have something to objectively say, this is my definition of good. This is my definition of success. More importantly, I think this is successful, and you can't tell me different. You can't come in me and tell Diem that Diem's not good enough, because I'm like, nope, I am. I met all these objectives that I was sought out for. Or you can't come and tell me that this job is going to change your life, Diem. Like, no, it doesn't really match up to what I want to be doing in my life. You know what I'm saying? Because you thought about it first. So you can't truly be able to stand up for yourself and have that confidence if you haven't taken time to work through it on your own and figure out what it is for you. So that's basically the breakdown and what it ends up with if you have that already figured out.
And we appreciate the breakdown. One of the things I wrote down expeditiously was you cannot fall into good relationships.
No, you absolutely cannot.
Oh, there are tons of organizations out there who are looking to take people for a ride. They're looking for riders. They're looking for
exactly. They really are. And that's what they ideally look for. And that's who they actually find. The people who are confident enough to say, again, oh, well, actually, what I want to do is this. My job title that I want to hold is this. These are the duties that I prefer to have passion about. This is the, people, the customers I want to make an impact on. This is where I like to live or where I want to work, which is remotely or non-remotely. This is my financial situation. So this is my salary requirement. Having all those things figured out and telling the employer that's not something that they see as ideal, because they're like, well, no, you're too much, but I come into all situations like that. Like, if you're reaching out, like, this is the value I'm bringing to you. I know it is, because this is why you're talking with me. So this is what I expect in return. Because again, this job is a resource for me, a tool. It is not my end goal. Never is a job going to be my end goal. I'm sorry, it just never will be. When I hit a certain job title, it's not going to be like, oh, my life is so changed and meaningful. It's a goal. It's a tool to be used to achieve something else. Like, so if I would like to live, with great work-life balance, a lot of free time, comfortably with my wife to go travel, that job is a tool to get me there. It is a necessary tool, right? But that's all that it is, and it's not a part of my identity. So that's just basically building healthy relationships with your employer really does force you, though, to build your identity outside of it, and then set your expectations as far as how this job can help you get there. That's really the nuances with building those type of relationships. Same way you shouldn't have too strong dependencies, say with a partner, right? If your entire identity is with your partner, whomever that is, and you have no identity outside of it, and you need them for 100% of everything, you really truly can't, have a healthy relationship with them, because it's just not healthy. You're too reliant on them. They can really, manipulate you, do what they want to you, exploit you. It's the same thing with your employer. If you feel like they're your everything, your identity is behind that employer, they are the air you breathe, you're never going to have a healthy relationship with boundaries with that employer.
Thank you so much for the words. One of the things I need for you to expound upon, because for myself, especially in the military and years after getting out of the military, I tied a lot of my identity to my work. No matter what I was doing, bust my ass at work 24/7, working until 6 hours after the clock out, not getting paid, but it's because I need to do this work. When did you start realizing that your work was not a part of your identity?
That's actually a very, very good question. I would say that it was after leaving the military, and basically trying to work for myself. Well, basically, so before I left the military, it's kind of interesting. I'm medically retired, so I already knew in advance, that I was going to end up leaving. So it's kind of like figuring out, well, who am I? Again, like, I don't need to be computer engineering. I like psychology better. So it was kind of like that space of self-discovery, like, who am I? What am I doing? But basically, I really realized it was when I was trying to go in the workforce and figure out what I was going to do. For every kind of transition military member, you try to work for us first. And I was just in these, basically like, I don't want to be a cashier, or I don't want to, do this. I just got done being, this fancy, intelligence person. And I just work for all these fancy companies. I can't now go in the civilian world and be nothing, basically, because I tied so closely, like, what I was doing and the company that I worked for to, but at the end of the day, I'm like, also, I had a 1-year-old son. I'm like, well, I do need to pay my bills as well, though. So, you're kind of caught in between. So I was like, you know what? Who I am at this moment, where I work at this moment, actually has no bearing on the fact that what I can do. So I really, truly kind of like, it's like, what, there's separation here. I can focus on, again, what my goals are and what I'm passionate about and who I really want to help. And that has no correlation and connection to what I may be doing, monetarily at that time, because again, it's a tool. So transition from military really helped me to understand that there is a difference. In the military, you see the uniform as you, you're all one, it's who you are. But when you leave, it's just like, well, then who am I? And then, so am I now a cashier? Oh, am I now, this, and am I now that? And, and just, there's so much instability in that if you're late, if this actually a lot of times too, I talk to people who call themselves their last employer. Right? Like ex Facebook, ex Amazon. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just it's the idea, though, that you hold so tightly this identity, the association with that brand, that you haven't found your own even with leaving. That's where I feel that there's a lot of times there's challenges, like where, again, self-awareness, let's back up a little bit and say, no, forget that company. That was a tool for you. Now, where do you want to go? What do you want to do now? Like, who are you and where is it that you're heading? So that's where, like, the focus should be less on the tools you have. Tools are degrees, because that's all it is. Whatever's in the back of this wall is a tool. When I walk out that house, ain't nobody worried about this. I'm not carrying them around with me. They don't ensure that I get anywhere. They're just a resource. The past clients I work with, all the fancy titles and the Fortune 500, Fortune whatever, those are tools that help me to achieve my goal. But I am Diem. I am me every day. And that's what I try to help people to understand. There is a differentiation between who you are and all of the fancy tools that you may have possessions of.
And all the fancy, and I apologize. Well, I don't apologize.
No, apologize.
I am tearing up because I don't think the military, I mean, they sure do understand what they do, but they tear people all the way down and then just send them on their happy ass way. Like, oh, definitely. You are a shell of a human being and you should figure it out on your own. The fact that you said, the part when you said, oh, if I do that, then I'll be nothing. because we had these fancy titles, or we had this, I was doing work for the my country.
Mission critical, and like everything was just so impactful. And
it's that internalized kind of hierarchy and like classism, and like it's a whole bunch of stuff. Was it hard for you to extract those thoughts? Was there ever a time where you're like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to extract this?
I would say maybe it wasn't necessarily difficult for me, only because I look at things so objectively. I don't necessarily resort to strong emotions for a lot of things, or not consciously aware of them. So my emotions don't necessarily negatively impact my decision making, which is something that some ways I can lean on. In this aspect, it did help me, because I was like, okay, well, back to my goal. Like, what am I trying to achieve, right? So I was like, okay, what am I trying to get to? The military experience is, it was one thing and it helped me get here, but now what am I trying to do to next? And so then I kind of divert my attention to say, okay, I need a plan. I defined like those 5 things. I truly, this is actually a process I did myself, thinking, this is where I want to get to. I want to be a psychologist, right? And I want to live in Maryland. Time I was like, I want to live in Maryland. I love state of Maryland. I've worked there before. I just did the same thing. I was like, so how am I going to get there? What's going to help me to achieve this goal? And basically that's kind of where I started from. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to focus on that. If I need to, actually I have a post recently where I talked about, government assistance. So for me, I'm like, you know what, I don't have to tie my identity to any resource or tool that I had to utilize to help me get to where I am. So whether it be that you're a cashier or you're working as an assistant temporarily, whether it be for my case, I was an entrepreneur, but I relied heavily on government assistance. Like all of you think of, I was Googling everything I could find. That is just simply is how, it's just a stepping stone for you to get to where you're trying to get to. So that's kind of how I see it, regardless again of the degrees and the companies and the all of this stuff. Even right now, I don't see my current company as like my identity. I don't even talk about it I don't talk about my job title that much, because I'm me, regardless of this company. It's just simply how I look at it. And they know it too, because I was upfront about it, when I go to bed every night, I'm not the fancy title and I'm not that company. I know, again, if I die, that company's going to continue on with it's doing. It's going to find someone to replace me and it's going to move on. But the relationships that I built and the impact that I made, that's what carries me if I go to the next job or the next job after that.
And I love that you talk about being upfront about it, because then they know, they are aware.
Exactly.
Maybe we have that conversation when I got in the bed with you. When I got in bed with you, I knew what it was.
Exactly.
Somebody commented in the chat that their sister was left disabled without much ability to transfer an experience elsewhere out of the military.
Absolutely.
Both medically retired. And I actually had a really hard time with that identity as well. Have you ever struggled with that identity at all?
I would say actually for the first several years I've been out now for like 6 years, I actually never mentioned it. It was not until I talked about being a vet. Because again, it kind of like, well, but where does it really fit in my life right now? And also like kind of the connotations and the assumptions that come with it, you're wounded and what can you really do? And, your PTSD, like things like that. You're right. So I was like, I don't want to work through all of that with you every single time I talk about being a vet. And I want to talk about combat as if that's, we're all Rambo or something, I didn't really want to have to cipher through those interactions a lot. So actually it was something I just didn't talk about at all. I wouldn't say that my experience in the military was negative necessarily. I think that it was an opportunity that I was able to capitalize on. Essentially, that's how I look at it. If I'm being honest, it was an opportunity. I was dirt poor, grew up, I was like homeless at the time, very young. And soon I turned 17, there you go. It was an opportunity. Again, it's the same idea though for me as the fact that I don't talk about previous, customers. I don't sit around talking about all the companies that I work for with fancy titles. That's just how I look at it, because again, I see myself as Diem, regardless of the others, that again, that's just my perspective of it. I'm not ashamed, of course, or anything. I've more recently talked about being a veteran only because to create representation of what a veteran looks like, but not because I necessarily tie my own identity to being a veteran.
And I appreciate that distinction, because there are so many people out there who don't realize that there are certain veterans who don't get to be proud of that identity.
Exactly.
In a lot of spaces. I be trying to be proud.
Exactly. It's not even allowed in some degree. They're like, you're a veteran. Like I was saying before, when I'm supposed to add about this, like even parking in a veteran parking spot, they're like, you're taking up too much space. Like that's not for you. Like this is for this type of veteran. It's like, so like I can't even, now I'm trying to be proud and claim being veteran and do part of the activities, and that's a problem. But again, don't even get me started with all that, because Geez, it's like there is no right answer or right, when you look like us, is what I'll say.
And to everyone who's listening, we are in no way, shape, or form telling you to not be proud of your identities, especially
No, absolutely
if
not.
that's where you find joy, if that's where you find peace. But we do want you to understand that the boundaries that you've created in those relationships with that identity, even the boundaries within yourself, are extremely important and help your mental
Absolutely.
health on a daily basis. One of the things I would love for you to emphasize is, oh, it's gone. Oh no, it's not gone. Okay. Is when you were struggling during that time, or even now, who is in your life who is supportive of you setting those boundaries and ensuring that you're not tying yourself to anything that doesn't feed back into you?
Sure. So actually during that time was actually kind of a transitioning period for me. So I actually don't have a very close relationship with my family for the same reasons where again, I established boundaries and I know who I am, what I need personally and professionally. And so actually during that time I was transitioning from a lot of toxic relationships to my family. And in time also I was in a pretty abusive relationship with my previous spouse. And actually during that time, the same thing, like basically like during time was like transitioning. I'm saying my boundaries and these aren't working for me. This is where I'm going, and y'all ain't cutting it, basically, And so actually I ended up getting separated I was separated at a time. So I actually had to end up, and I had to move to the state. I was by myself. I was in Pennsylvania at the time for a particular role. So it was just me and actually my son. So actually, I feel like I was like a lot of internal motivation. So, but what I ended up doing is like, I leaned heavily on like therapy. I realized like, what, it's okay not to do it by yourself. You don't have to be this tough person who's like, I can tough through it, especially as people of color. I feel like we're always taught to just tough through everything, you don't need help, just get through it. And someone hypothetically has been through worse, right? It's always somebody's like, oh, someone's worse. So it's like, no, I realized I'm in this situation by myself. I have these high aspirations for myself. I'm, single parent. I'm going through separation and family is now gone. I leaned heavily on, my therapist at the time. She helped me with, of course, my symptom of autism, where I was able to really work through, social interactions and help me to better communicate. It took many years of me getting to the point where I'm right now. Actually, this is very new for me. All this engagement stuff that I do now, it's complete transition from what I was before, where I was completely like this. I stayed to myself. I never really communicated, worked remotely and all that. But yeah, I would say therapists really helped me. And then of course, it helped me meeting my wife, who completely like changed my life as far as being able to support me and just having this, this best friend who can hear, things that go on in my life. And it's like, hey, you know what, I can help you through this. Or, I'm going to hear you listen as you complain or, things like that. I didn't even know they're important until I had it. And I'm like, you know what, this is something that's really critical to my own mental health and help me to, continue on and to deal with all the things that come with, looking like me and being who I am in my profession. Because I am definitely I don't look the same as everyone else. Far from it. I have a lot, actually, not just looks. I am very different than most people in my profession. So I have to deal with quite a lot of backlash. The way I perceive the world is so different. So I did a lot of backlash. LinkedIn, posting something, I actually space it out. Like most people don't know, they ask me I don't post more often. Like most influencers post every day. And first, I'm not an influencer. First and foremost, like I don't get paid for this. No one's paying my bills for this. Second, it's taxing. It's emotionally taxing to have to comment and like meet people where they are or hear their complaints or their ridicule. Like I could not expose myself to that every single day. So my wife has actually been really supportive of me with using this platform to actually talk. I've never been this person to really open like this. So I would definitely say my wife is critical at this point. My son's 7 now, so he's a little shaky, but sometimes he can give a little encouragement here and there.
That sounds like an amazing support system. I love once again that you talked about the tool of therapy. There are so many people that share our identities that look like us who are fearful of moving into that space. Do you have a few words for them about the people that may be fearful about reaching out to a therapist?
Sure. So I would say that being just going into situation, kind of knowing what you're wanting, and that it kind of helps you, because the same thing that I think confidence in general comes from simply that self-awareness piece. Like I'm gonna always fall back to self-awareness, like I told you. So really going in and saying, what is it that I'm hoping to gain? Like you may not know all of it, but just kind of say like, okay, this is something I'm roughly trying to come into, and in what situation are you more comfortable in? Like, so what situations would make you comfortable? Is it talking on the phone? Is it going in person? Is it remote calls? Like kind of think about that in advance. Then like, well, who do you think you might be comfortable talking to? Describe like, is it, a woman? Is it a man? Is it based off ethnicity, religion, preferences of any kind? Because you are within your rights to have purposes, to have boundaries, to have expectations of this. Because like I mentioned again, this is a resource, a tool. This therapist, this relationship you're building is a tool for you to achieve some larger goal, right? Because therapy is not, but it is a way in which you can achieve a goal. So have that plan. Say, this is what I'd be comfortable in this situation. This is, when I would be most comfortable talking. This is who I'd be most comfortable talking with, and be confident that that's exactly who you're going to go find. That's really it. Like, you have power. You have the power to say, this is who exactly it is that I want to work with. Same way you have the power to choose, if you're a working employer, choose your relationships in all ways. And that is a relationship, a very meaningful relationship. So please take it seriously, and I'm not saying be critical, but set those boundaries, set those expectations in advance. So that way you're not falling into that situation either, because you really can. You can fall into situations with therapists because like this is the only practitioner is open. It's now you're sitting across this person who doesn't connect with you, doesn't understand your plights, doesn't understand what you're talking about, your struggles, and you're sitting there for a month or 6 months goes by and nothing has been gained. That you can choose to leave that relationship too and go find one that's better for you.
Ooh, a lot of words that you have spoken directly to me. I know the rest of the audience is going to resonate as well. But one of the ones that really, the idea that came to mind is going outside of your network. We are both veterans. I used to stay in TRICARE for mental health. I no longer be in TRICARE.
No, I do absolutely not either. I'm not.
Yeah. Great value as hell. Like I had to do better. And when you're moving forward and better, you just find better. I love that you talked about how that transition period of your life was a whole transition.
Yes.
And for anybody listening, that's what happens. It's no two lives. It's not work life. It's the whole.
It's the whole. Yeah, exactly.
When was the last time you reminded yourself, or I guess the universe or anything that was happening around you reminded you there's no two lives? This is the whole enchilada.
Honestly, I feel like it's like an everyday thing. It seriously is like every day, because when I just think about, again, like, where am I going? What do I want to do? I talk to my wife all the time about kind of, is communication so critical with that, as far as like where you're headed to, make sure you're in the same direction. I think all the time, like, the overlap between my professional life, even down to this, like speaking engagement, how much I'm trying to share with others, and how taxing or how time consuming that could be. And then to my professional life with, again, how does that look? And am I going to be willing to travel? But then also my personal life, and how am I building a relationship with, her and, our growing family and things like that. It's just, when you really reflect on yourself and you say, this is, again, who I want to be, this is who I am, this is my desires, these are my boundaries, these are my expectations of others, you mold relationships like that. Like, and you start to see there's a pattern, like, not saying that you look at everything like a job interview, but I start looking at everybody like, I'm like, oh, now I have questions for you. You have questions for me? No, I have some questions for you, because I know what I'm expecting out of the situation. So I'm going to need, just like you have a job description, well, I have a description of what you need to be a good resource for me. And again, you come with that confidence, because how does a hiring manager have confidence in asking you questions? Because they looked at the organization, they said, this is what's missing. And so I need a role that can specifically do this and have these credentials in order to fill this gap in what I need. That's what a hiring manager does. It's all they're doing. They're saying, there's a gap in my team, and this is my business objective, and I need you to do this. Well, I'm the same way. So in my life as a whole, because again, it's not two things, and now my whole life, here's a gap. There's a gap right here where I'm trying to meet this financial goal. And look, hiring manager, you're filling this one in because the salary needs to be this much. And I need this and I need this to be able to be of value. You're looking at the same exact way, And so again, it's just looking at relationships, there are some good transactional, like you need to figure out, well, what are you getting from it? Because if it's not bringing value, you're not going to maintain it. You're not going to want to keep that up. So in order for that to be a value to you, what do you have to do? What is required of you to get that value? So start thinking about that in advance. Like, does it require my time? It requires my resources. It requires effort. Are you willing to put that in? Yes or no? And then only then can you really establish those boundaries, those expectations, and be able to communicate that effectively to other people. Because again, you're not falling into it. You're saying right up front, this is who I am. And this is what I'm, looking for. This is what I need. This is the value that I'm hoping that you bring. Can you do that? Yes or no? Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of funny story, but I actually did the same thing with my wife too. Yeah, she'll joke about it, but I gave like, this is who I am. Like, this is Diem, and this is where I'm in this phase of my life. This is where I'm hoping to get to, and this is the value that I truly believe that, you could bring me. Are you down for that or not,
Mm-hmm. And to anyone in the audience who may be thinking, okay, y'all making it sound easy. Do you know that racism exists? Do you know that homophobia exists? Do you know?
Yeah, of
We
course.
are aware. We are
Oh,
aware.
absolutely.
we,
Yeah.
we are aware. We live here. But what we're saying to you is change does not happen unless you make change happen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have been in several organizations where I have been the only one, or I've been the first one to ask very specific questions. Have you ever been in a situation where you've been the first or the only?
Well, yes, that's probably I don't even, it's hard to think about ones that I'm not. Actually, it'd be easier just to go back to now. Honestly, and professionally, in my situations, I'm always the youngest. I'm always kind of the strange one, like, oh, you're the queer, they, whatever you got going over there, usually the only Black person for sure. And then on top of that, is a lot of times if there is another Black person, it's usually that they're like more formal, like, they go above and beyond, as far as like how they're speaking, how they dress, how they present themselves, and that whole thing, like, they work extra hours, and is, which is nothing wrong with that. You have to, you definitely do, as a person of color, you have to be 1,000 times better than everyone else in order to get those seats at the table. It's just not the approach that I've taken with my life. We take different roles, so it makes me even different from even that. So it's like, oh man, like you're like, what are you, what do you got going on? And again, I found that confidence in simply saying, this is the value I bring. And, inside and out, I can tell you every time there's never any inconsistency in it. I'm telling you right now, in this role, this is value I'm going to bring for you. I'm a psychologist, and I have these understanding frameworks. I'm a strategist, I'm a coach, and blah, 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 right? I'm telling you, again, any other situation, I can always tell you exactly how I can bring value to someone. So it's not that I'm just like saying it has to be this way, or my way, the highway. I'm saying, no, this is the value I'm bringing. This is value that you clearly need, because we're having this conversation together. So this is a two-way, this is going to be a two-way street. You now know the value I can bring to you. And I've explained it to you. I'm talking about my past experiences, talking about my education, whatever. I've already done a whole little dance for you. Now, the value that I'm needing from you, because I'm not here for no reason. Obviously, you're bringing value to me. So I'm going to go and communicate that to you, what I'm expecting to make sure that this is a value on my end. It's really that expectation that you're setting at the very beginning. Ooh. Whatever it is. And honestly, and I will say, this is one thing I have to say too, because how I'm able to navigate spaces in this way is, I also have learned, somewhat of a privilege, is that when what you bring to the table is seen as valuable, right? Because it's ways, and some people are seen more valuable than others. You have more of this ability to navigate spaces in this way. So I have actually identified that privilege. I happen to fall into a career in which it is seen as highly desirable, right? So if it wasn't, no one would be willing to comply. But because I am seen as, I'm deemed as valuable, they are willing to make accommodations for me. So that is something I also consider, then it's something privileged that I had to sit in. It's like, what, I happened to get the right degree and the right time, and then I had the right specialization. But had it been something different that I was passionate about, that no one, cared about, it wouldn't be this level of ease. So there is that to consider as well.
And I love that you're sitting in this privilege, but also showing up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
As possible, because it allows people who may not have that privilege to also show up in those spaces.
Exactly.
Definitely. The people that are going to be listening to this conversation are probably going to be thinking about choosing differently tomorrow, and having
have the right to
with everyone around them about the expectations that they maybe didn't have before. What would be the top 3 tips that you would share with them about having these choosy conversations?
Sure. Top 3. Number 1, build your self-awareness. Self-awareness is key. You have to define success for yourself, define a good relationship for yourself, define what that is. Next one would be to determine what tools are necessary. Is it degree? Is it certification? Is it the certain job title, whatever. Choose your resources that align with it. And then 3 will probably just continue to develop, whether it be develop, relationships that you're, building externally, whether it be developed as in, personal growth, working out, meditation. Just continue to develop, don't stay stagnant, because, you want to continue to keep learning more about yourself and continue growing in who you are. It really helps you with the confidence that you're going to need to continue to navigate these spaces.
And I appreciate the last one, because there are a lot of people that believe with the frames that you have in the background that you have probably stopped your development, or like, okay.
No, absolutely not. You really can't. There's more to learn. That's for sure.
There's more to learn. Thank you so much for sharing that with everybody who needed to hear it. Are there any last minute sprinkles that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I think that you asked some wonderful questions. So I would say thank you to you for, having me on and asking these really, really important questions, actually.
Thank you so much. For everybody who is listening to this, please listen to the sound of my voice and Diem's voice about choosing, setting those expectations, and just not settling for less. This has been Absolutely Not, and we'll see you all next time. Keep setting those boundaries and saying absolutely not to anything unaligned. Bye.